Andrew Jacobs, and we do these shows every Tuesday night. I'm the host of the Sports Psychology Hour, which airs here in Kansas City, the radio show, Sunday mornings from 7 to 8 on 810 WHB, Sports Radio 810 WHB. You can listen to the shows live at www.810whb.com. And every Tuesday night, I do a sports psychology interview. And tonight, I'm very privileged to have Dr. Brook Choulet. She is the team psychiatrist for the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury at WNBA, which is in the middle of their season right now. And she's been kind enough to join us this evening. So, Brooke, thanks for being with us on the Sports Psychology Hour here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, I've been working for 43 years as a sports psychologist. I've worked with all levels of sports. I'm currently the team psychologist for the Kansas City Current of the NWSL. And the importance of mental health in sports has expanded dramatically the last 10 years. When I first started back in 1981, virtually no one had heard of sports psychology, and most people were against having a psychologist, let alone a psychiatrist, affiliated with the teams. So tell me how you've gotten involved in this, and let's share with us what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So in 2021, I was brought on as the team psychiatrist for the Phoenix Suns, and then shortly after for the Phoenix Mercury. And I was with them up until December of this last year in 2023, and then really saw, for many reasons, I'm sure we'll get into, the importance of being on the player association side of things. And so in December, I transitioned over to being a mental health provider on the National Basketball Player Association registry, and then as well as the NFL Player Association registry. So I really enjoy working with the athlete and focusing on that kind of individual clinician to athlete care rather than some of the organizational structures that come into working with a team environment.
How has it been for you to get involved in this? Because when I first started, like I said, back in 1981, people wanted nothing to do with me. They saw it as witchcraft and hocus pocus and all that type of stuff. In fact, one athletic director said, "I don't believe in that," as he walked away from me. So how have you gotten yourself integrated in, and how do you see the players especially opening up and sharing with you?
Sure. I think you use the key word as integration. And I think for the teams I've seen that have successful programs, there's true integration where the clinician is just a natural part of the team. So they are at practice, they're on the road. I traveled for a bit with the team too, just being a familiar face and going through the motions of what they have to do daily. I think that takes away that, almost like draws back the curtain on the I'm the clinician here and I'm treating you, and it just normalizes the whole relationship. So I think that was one really key component, is integration, and then two is policy. So when it's just a natural part of what every team environment offers, it's not weird anymore, right? It's just, oh, well, I know if I'm in this city or that city, there's going to be a mental health clinician available and they'll probably be around, and I'm not really going to be able to escape them. So I think just having it integrated in policy as well, where it's just a normal part of the the preseason physical, is really the key to success with these programs.
I think that's great, because when I first started, the first professional team I worked with was the Kansas City Comets of the Major Indoor Soccer League back in 1984 and 85. And what we did was, the coach and I met. The head coach was fired on Christmas, or resigned on Christmas Eve. Then they hired the assistant coach. I got hired that same day, and he's like, "Well, who are you?" And we met, and I said, "Well, I think the important thing is for me to be around the team on a regular basis." And so I was at practice on a regular basis, about 3 days a week. And then every 10 days we had a team meeting. And eventually I got integrated in as basically part of the team. And so I think that's what you're doing as well, because otherwise, if you're just a name that they want to go talk to, the resistance is going to be there and the hesitancy is going to be there. Do you agree?
Right. And even being in person, the hesitancy is there. And I think that's where education really comes into play. I am not here for crisis. I am not here because you have a mental health disorder. I'm here to help you be a better person. I'm here to understand what some of your strengths and weaknesses are, and seeing where we can kind of turn up the intensity on focus on something. So I like to make the comparison, just like you would go rehab in the physical training room. I don't understand why it's different with mental skills training or mental performance.
Well, in my opinion, there isn't a difference. There shouldn't be a difference, but
Right.
unfortunately, and there still are people who are resistant to people like us being around.
Hmm.
Still are people who have that old school mentality where they don't feel it's necessary to have a shrink, quote unquote, around because we have
Hmm.
problems. In fact, uh, I had that when I first got started. Teams, we don't have problems. I'm like, well, yeah, actually, you do, but they don't want to admit it. So let's talk about some of the issues that you deal with players. Mental health has now become an accepted part of sports.
Hmm.
The importance of mental health professionals like ourselves being around is important. So, what are some of the things that you deal with some of the athletes? What have been some of the issues and topics you've had to cover?
Yeah, I think throughout my practice, seeing athletes of all different sports, performance anxiety is always a big one. That self-doubt, it doesn't help that you have all these friends or family likely on payroll if your salary is very, public and expensive and well paid. So just managing all these expectations on top of the skill that you're brought out there to kind of carry out. And I think that just working with athletes on setting boundaries and effectively communicating with people is huge. It's something I talk about over and over again, that setting boundaries is not equate being mean, and setting boundaries is just a natural part of life, especially when you're in the spotlight. So I think just on a personal level, boundary setting and performance anxiety are huge. And then ADHD is another big one, general anxiety, depression, all these things that oftentimes athletes don't come in and say, I'm depressed. They come in and they're maybe like, oh, I blew up at my wife, or I'm really irritable and angry, and kind of piecing together the symptoms that they're reporting. It's not as frequent as in my just general, population outpatient where someone might come in and say, I think I'm depressed. And so I feel like there's
The,
that difference.
the first thing you mentioned there was like expectations and
Mhm.
others. And one of the things I've encountered, God, countless times throughout my career has been the athlete who's got all these people hanging around him and wanting this and wanting that, and tugging at them for money and tickets and notoriety. So how do you handle that with the athletes to get them to understand parameters and boundaries so that they don't get sucked out of their focus zone that they need to be in?
Mhm. Almost go through this mental exercise of pretend like you are the only person in your home or in your environment, and think about what it is that you want. Like, what do you want? And oftentimes they take a pause and they're like, Actually, I don't know what I want because I have all these other people telling me what they want." So I just try and have them zoom out of their situation and just reflect on what is it that you actually want. And let's start there and figure out a way that you can achieve that.
That's great. That's great because the expectations of others get sucked into their lives and they want to please
Mhm.
everybody else, and sometimes that can take away from their performance because they start worrying about everything and everybody else. So I'm sure you
Mhm.
deal with that quite a bit. you know um, Depression, you mentioned that, and large percentage of our society is depressed. Athletes are no different.
Right.
We go back to Kevin Love when he had an anxiety attack a few years
Mhm.
ago and really opened the door for mental health in professional sports as an opening. Um,
Mhm.
and it came out that he was dealing with some depression and things like that. How can you get an athlete to admit that and to confront that and then to work through it?
I think using a motivational interviewing approach is sometimes helpful, where you're kind of guiding them to identify how their symptoms are maybe negatively impacting their life versus positively impacting their life. And then, reflecting, it sounds like it's much more negatively impacting you than positively impacting you. Have you noticed that? Really reflecting back to them and having them come to that conclusion themselves is often the most helpful. It's like someone saying you need to go to the gym versus guiding you to feel motivated to go to the gym. It's all the world difference.
The NBA seems to be, in my opinion, ahead of the other major sports leagues in terms of our work.
Mhm.
Are you agreeing with that, and why do you think that is?
I would venture to say that Formula One is the most kind of progressive and ahead because they actually have a mind gym at some of their Formula One races in addition to their physical gym. And that really shows that they value and emphasize the importance of mental skills training and preparing mentally before your sport. So I think that, Formula One in my mind is probably got it going on the most. And then
Yeah.
US Olympics is really stepping up their resources, and in Paris this year they're going to have I don't know all the specifics, but I was talking to someone in the psychological services there, and she said that they're actually going to have AI that's, somehow blocking on social media the athletes seeing any bullying or negative comments. And so, those types of things are really interesting to me, where we're using AI and all of these really cool technologies to really, better the mental health of the athletes.
When I graduated grad school in 1981, on my drive back from San Diego to Kansas City, I stopped at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, and we had an interview set up with the assistant head of sports medicine. And after 15 minutes, he said, "Listen, we don't need any of you PhD types running around here telling us what's wrong with our athletes." And that was August of 1981.
Mhm.
And then they started what was called the Elite Athlete Program, which then following June, I got a call from them saying the cycling team was interested in having a sports psychologist. So the growth in the U.S. Olympic team has been, I know I'm still a member of the sports psychology registry.
Mhm.
That's grown immensely since then. And like you're saying, now the recognition, I know there'll be a number of psychologists with the U.S.
Mhm.
Olympic team in Paris. I was in LA with the cycling team back in
Mhm.
84, 40 years ago, which blows my mind. It was that long ago, but I worked with them through 88 and went to 3 world championships. And
Mhm.
I was accepted by pretty much most of them as just part of the team. And we're seeing now, like you said, the acceptance of mental health professionals working with the athletes. We saw with Simone Biles in the Tokyo Olympics having the twisties, having to withdraw from the gymnastics events. And what was interesting to me was there was a podcast with a guy who just criticized her immensely. Said she was a traitor to the United States for doing that.
Wow.
So one of the things that I get into with professional athletes that I work with and Olympic level athletes as well, stay off social media during your time competing, because
Mhm.
of course a show like this would be great for them to listen to. But I always tell them to stay off social media. Don't look at it. Don't read it. Don't.
Mhm.
If you have a site you want to have stuff post, have somebody do it for you, but stay off of it because of the negativity that can come out of that. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that's one thing that's being discussed in various locker rooms at halftime is, do we, have players drop their phone in the basket before the game starts so that they can't just scroll social or read text messages from their family in the stands telling them they suck or need to do this or that to get better? How would that impact performance for players to have their phones removed during competition and in the middle of the game? You see at halftime just scrolling through social or responding to text messages. So I completely agree with you that if there is any doubt that it could lead to negativity, which we know with social there's just absolutely no reason to be putting yourself in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, I'm here in Kansas City where we have a pretty good football team, as
Mhm.
everybody knows. And in the
Yeah.
playoffs, when the Chiefs played Buffalo, uh, Tyler Bass, Buffalo's kicker, missed a kick at the end of the game, which would have, put tied the game, I believe, or even put Buffalo ahead. But anyway, the Chiefs won, and within 2 days, Tyler Bass was getting death threats
Mm.
on his website, his sites. So he totally got off every piece of social media and quit
Mhm.
posting on there. And I'm like, he missed a kick and he's getting death threats. I mean, that
Mhm.
that just shows me to me how important it is for, I think, athletes to just, stay within themselves, have a comfort zone of people that they trust. It's a small group, and then leave it at that during their competition, because otherwise they get drawn all over the place. So you would agree with me on that. Have you ever had to deal with that directly with an athlete about their media or the stuff they get confronted with?
Yeah, I think it happens often where people will come to a session distressed about something that just happened on social media, or they posted something in support of someone else and someone was trash talking them. So I think it comes up naturally when you just catch someone in for a session and you're like, "Hey, how's your day going?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, this just happened on social media," because it's such an ingrained part of their day. So I think it just goes to show what a impact people can have. And the biggest thing I think that was a lesson for me is that seeing how the public treats these players, like when we're on the road and stuff, it's people just forget that they're actual people. They have families, they have children, they have, like they have feelings, all these things that, people just love to pretend like it's a spectacle almost, that this is for entertainment purposes only, and forget that they're human.
Oh yeah, I mean there are many times when I work with Kansas City Royals and I'd be at dinner with one
Mhm.
of the players and people would all of a sudden realize who it was, and then we'd get bombarded with people wanting to come over and get autographs. They'd have to put a rope around our table to keep
Mhm.
people away. And you know, some of the players they would get pretty hostile. Some people sticking stuff in their face while they're eating. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm eating my dinner. Yeah, well, my son wants an autograph. Well, you know what, sir? I'm eating. I'll do it later.
Right.
So yeah,
I think that was one other really kind of sad thing that I came to conclude after traveling was the isolation, because
right.
people think that, oh, this, is such a glamorous lifestyle, when in fact, because of those instances that you just described, players feel like they have to stay in their room. Why would they want to go out when they could just order a Starbucks to their room or order room service if they're going to be pestered like that? And so it just perpetuates almost this worsening mental state where you are just alone with yourself and your thoughts on the road and really don't have much interaction with people outside of your game day.
So let me ask you about the professional female athlete now, because we're
Mhm.
seeing women's sports exploding on the scene, from the
Yes.
collegiate level all the way. Well, even in high school, but especially at the collegiate women's gymnastics has just taken over
Mhm.
excitement. But professional women's sports, you work with the Mercury WNBA. So tell us a little bit about some of the issues specifically related to female athletes at the professional level.
Yeah, I think just in general, the comparison to how their male counterparts are treated. I think seeing the very, very big difference between how female professional players are treated in the same league compared to their male counterparts, the salary compared to the male counterparts. I think all of those things create this inequity, even though they're both at the professional level, the top of their level in their sport, can really cause some frustration and dynamics that are, not encountered in a male sporting environment.
Have you worked with any female athletes who are mothers?
Oh yeah. Yep.
And what is unique for them compared to say the single athlete that you've had to deal with and confront?
I think the expectation of not leaving your child, right? So when you're traveling and on the road, it's almost this passing of judgment or shame if you're leaving to travel for your sport and leaving your child in the care of someone else in your family. Men don't experience that as often, yet they have children too. So I think that kind of inequity is pretty prevalent.
So how do you help them get through that? What do you say to them about that?
I'm really a huge fan of talking to all my patients in different aspects of their life when we're talking about different things, about envisioning themselves like they are the bubble boy from Seinfeld, where they have this protective shield that no matter if someone compliments them, says an insult to them, praises them, neither positive or negative feedback should impact or alter their level of self-worth. And that's something I really hit home and hit heavy with all athletes I see and everyone I see, whether it's a man or a woman. So in this situation with, female athletes that have children leaving to travel for their sport, none of that noise should impact your self-worth at all, because you are doing what you think is best for you and your family at the end of the day. So why does anyone else's opinion matter?
In today's society now with the pro athletes that you encounter and work with, what would you say the biggest stressors are, the biggest mental areas that need to be addressed?
I think on court or on field related is performance anxiety, and then off court, off field is managing expectations and communication
And expectations from who?
from others, whether it's family, friends, agents, coaches, someone from 20 years ago who thinks they deserve a piece of the pie, like everyone.
You know, throughout the years of my work, one of the things that I've found with the level of athletes at the professional level is when you get introduced to them and start working with them, there's always a little hesitancy, but there's always one or two people that'll come up to you right away, and then the door opens. Have you found that to work as well when you work with the team?
Sometimes I think I meet with people pretty discreetly, so they don't really have the opportunity for other people to see that someone's working with me or seeing me. So I haven't had too much experience with that.
So when you're with the team, did they give you an office? Like when you were associated with the team, do you have a office or a room or a place where they can come see you on their own? Or how do you get that to work?
Yeah, so if when I was going to practice or on the road, I'm integrated. I'm there just like the PT person is, who isn't necessarily actively rehabbing someone. And then if someone wants to schedule a session with me, then they could text me and we could set up a time for them to come to my private practice office or see them on Zoom. Or I do concierge psychiatry, so I go to people's homes. Or on the road is really easy because we could meet, at a coffee shop a few blocks away. So I think, I try and really be discreet about who I'm working with, even though at the time it may be known that I'm available to a whole team.
One more question before we wrap things up. One of the things I've noticed in the field of sports psychology and sports psychiatry is there's a huge interest from all kinds of people getting involved in this who aren't qualified. Have you encountered a
Yes.
lot of that as well?
You hit the nail on the head. So last year, six other sports psychiatrists and I formed the American Board of Sports and Performance Psychiatry because, just like you said, with psychology, it's been very well established for a while through the Applied Association of Sports Psychology, and there are sport and performance psychologists. But in the psychiatry world, there were so many people that were liking sports, interested in getting involved in sports, maybe saw one athlete ever and calling themselves sports
Call themselves a sports
psychiatrists.
psychiatrist, right?
Right. And so we came together to form this board. So I'm the president of this national board, and we really have set an accreditation standard to making sure people are qualified. We have three different pathways. We have the experience provider pathway for people that have been practicing for over 5 years that meet certain criteria. Then we have pathway B, which is for people that have been actively working in sports for about 2 to 3 years with another certain set of criteria. And then we have pathway C that's being developed, which is just for that general psychiatrist who wants to get involved, that they would be put through kind of a cohort educational program to give them the additional kind of education and training.
That's great because I know in my field, there are just all kinds of people all over the place who call themselves sports psychologists who aren't. I mean, there's
Right.
one individual in the Kansas City area calls herself a sports psychologist, and she's not a psychologist. That it happens quite a bit, as you're certainly aware of. Listen,
Mhm.
this has been fascinating talking with you, Dr. Choulet. So if people like to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
Sure, they can reach me through my website, BrookChouletMD.com. So BrookChouletMD.com. And my cell phone number and direct email address are on the website.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been great. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I really wish you tremendous success. I can see you know what you're doing, and I know the people that work with you are privileged to have an association with you. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to have me.
So if you enjoyed our conversation, visit my website, winnersunlimited.com. Click on the podcast tab. You can listen to episodes of the show. We've got close to 10 years of podcasts on there. That's winnersunlimited.com. Thanks for joining us tonight.